Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? The more things change, the more they stay the same. The Saints have had a massive defensive exodus. David Onyemata and Shai Tuttle were first. We've also since learned that Marcus Davenport is headed to Minnesota on a one-year deal. And Caden Ellis, the one that really stings, is headed to Atlanta as well on a 3-year deal. But the more things change, the more they stay the same. While those players are leaving, Jameis Winston and Michael Thomas are returning to the New Orleans Saints. These are two players that it was widely assumed were gone. And good reason. The way their contracts were structured, there was no way they were going to be back under the contracts that they had coming into this 2023 cycle. But you rework a few deals, you have a soft market. It's amazing what might happen for each of them. Ian Rappaport on the NFL Network today on Michael Thomas's new deal with the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, a significant development for the New Orleans Saints. There's been a lot of discussion over the last several months about Michael Thomas leaving his contract. They tinkered with it before the start of the league year, but I am told they have now reached an agreement for Michael Thomas to come back to New Orleans on a reworked one-year deal, incentive-laden deal, about $10 million. He can get $15 million at its max. And Michael Thomas, really one of the best receivers in the NFL when healthy. He showed that early on in last year, then unfortunately was injured again. He actually had been recruiting Derek Carr to come be the Saints quarterback, and then Carr signed, and then he was recruiting Michael Thomas to stay on a reworked contract. This one always made sense. It's not a signing, but it feels like it's big a one for the Saints.
So I'm really torn on this. The Jameis Winston thing, I get it from the Saints' perspective completely. I don't get it from Jameis's perspective. I get it from the Saints' perspective completely. You went into last year with Jameis Winston as your starter, Andy Dalton as your backup. Now, we know what happened. Jameis got hurt after 2 weeks. They rode with Dalton the rest of the way with really poor results. Now, you go into the season with Derek Carr as your starter, and the guy that was going to be your starter a year ago is the backup. So your starter-backup combo is better in 2023 than it was a year ago. And you get Jameis on a very palatable 4-year deal that could, with incentives, get him to $4 million deal. 1 year, $4 million, that could get him to $8 million with incentives, which he's, unless if Derek Carr gets injured, he's not going to hit those incentives. So I get it from the Saints' perspective. It's affordable, and you get a really capable backup. I mean, you have needed for the last 4 years, each of the last 4 years, your starting quarterback has been injured, and you've needed your backup, and actually going back to 2018. So the last 5 seasons, you've seen your backup have to play. So, yes, I love having a competent backup. Makes sense for the Saints. If you're Jameis, it doesn't really make a lot of sense because I presume he wants to be a starter again, and you may hem and haw and say the market has spoken. He would have had an opportunity to at least compete for a job somewhere. Washington just saw Taylor Heineke leave to go to Atlanta. You could look at other spots where they're presumably going to draft a quarterback, if it's Carolina, if it's Houston, if it's Indianapolis, and maybe it's a scenario where they don't want to throw their rookie first-round pick into the fire right away. Look at what happened this year. Marcus Mariota in Atlanta. They had Desmond Ridder. They started Mariota. Eventually, he gave way to Ridder, but at least have an opportunity to play. Listen, I'm thrilled to have this scenario for the Saints where you've got Carr, Winston. It's a better option than most anything else that was going to be realistic. I'm just a little surprised from Jameis's perspective that he's back on a 1-year deal to be a backup again. But again, that's a decision he can make, and maybe it's something where he just likes the city, wants to be here, and likes the organization, and he's willing to accept being a backup because that's what he's going to be here. The Michael Thomas thing for me is a little harder to come to grips with. You got to know when to cut bait. That's true in darn near everything. That's true in business. That's true in investments. That's true in relationships. That's true in NFL free agency. Sometimes you got to know when it's over. And to stop sinking assets and resources into something that's not going to work. If you know it's not going to work, stop investing in it. Like, cut your losses, move on. Saints gave Michael Thomas an enormous contract, and for the first year of it, he was awesome. Literally the best season in NFL history. More receptions than any receiver in the history of the league, was the NFL Offensive Player of the Year. Awesome. The last 3 years, he's played a total of 10 games. I'm going to say that again slowly. Over the last 3 seasons, Michael Thomas has played a total of 10 games. 7 in 2020. He missed all of 2021 and played in just 3 games a year ago. Now, when we saw Michael Thomas play last year, it was like, oh, that looks familiar. The Atlanta game, 5 catches, 57 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I recognize that guy. Week 2 against Tampa, 6 catches, 65 yards, and a score. It's like, oh, it's Michael Thomas. Yeah, I got it. And then he hurt the toe and never came back. But then there's this. The Saints signed Michael Thomas to a 1-year deal. $10 million. Incentives could get him to $15 million. Which, by the way, was the value of the deal he had. Would have paid him $15 million this year. So it's basically like saying, hey, we're not paying you $15 million, but if you perform up to it, we will. And so I look at the Saints receiver situation and I say, I know Chris Olave is good. Jarvis Landry's likely not back. Who else do you have? I like Rashid Shaheed. Really good rookie year. I think a lot you can build on there. But it's not enough. You didn't tender Marquez Callaway. He could be back, but he could sign somewhere else. Basically, all you know you have is Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed. And Shaheed flashed, but can he be a 17-game contributor at receiver? Remains to be seen. Y'all know how I feel about Tre'Quan Smith. And then you got guys like Kirk Merritt and other dudes that are just have been practice squad guys. You hope at some point Keith Kirkwood might break through, but you don't count on him. You need to add competent receivers. Draft, free agency, you're going to have to do both. So where can you go spend $10 million 1 year on a free agent receiver for $10 million and get the potential of a Michael Thomas? So that's where I go, okay, if there's this big sliding scale, and the sliding scale is on one end, you have 2021, where Michael Thomas misses the entire season. And on the other end of the scale, you have 2019 Michael Thomas, who was the NFL Offensive Player of the Year. In 2023, where on that sliding scale is Michael Thomas? And I don't know the answer to it. But if you get even 75%, 60% of 2019 Michael Thomas, and you're talking about a guy who potentially could give you 60 catches, man, more than that. 50% of 2019 Michael Thomas is 75 catches. Guy caught 149 balls. If he gives you half of that production, 75 catches for 900 yards? Okay. I mean, for $10 million for 1 year? Okay. I'd be thrilled with that. That looks a lot like Chris Olave's rookie year when he was your number 1. So if Michael Thomas gives you 40% of 2019 Michael Thomas, that's still a worthwhile investment. The problem is, I don't know if he can give you 40% of 2019 Michael Thomas. You got a 3-year sample now that says the guy can't stay healthy. He's not going to be healthy. So did you just throw $10 million into a fire? Maybe. But what were your options? You could have made a longer-term investment in somebody. DJ Chark, for example. I'm talking about realistic options that would have cost about this. Spotrac has DJ Chark's projected market value at 3 years, $28.7 million, averages out to $9.5 million. I'm not just throwing out a guy because he's an LSU guy. It's the closest market value for a younger receiver. Like, that's what you'd be in the market for. Do you want to commit 3 years to DJ Chark at nearly $30 million bucks, or 1 year to Michael Thomas to see what happens? If the Saints remain in win now mode, which clearly they are, and I've told you, I'm not on board with that strategy. Like, I personally think they should be taking a different approach to the offseason and rebuilding the roster, but I'm not the GM. I don't get to make these decisions. So if you are in win now mode, I get it. 1 year, incentive laden, maybe you get 50% of the guy that was an all-pro, and if you do, that's a really good number 2 behind Chris Olave. Now, can he stay healthy? I don't believe he can. He's given me no reason to believe so over the last 3 years that he will. But if he does, it's a worthwhile investment. So we'll see. Michael Thomas and Jameis Winston both back in New Orleans. Wild. Would not have thought that a month ago. Might not have thought that a week ago. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.